You know what's ironic? We spend hundreds of dollars on mulch, irrigation systems, and drought-resistant plants while simultaneously destroying the free drought protection that nature keeps giving us. I'm talking about weeds. Yes, weeds. But not just any weeds. There are 5 specific species that most gardeners rip out on site, not realizing these plants are actually working overtime to protect your garden soil from drying out, cracking, and turning into concrete during those brutal summer months. I'm going to show you exactly which weeds to keep, where to keep them, and how to manage them so they work for you instead of against you. By the end of this video, you'll never look at your garden the same way again. And fair warning, your neighbors might think you've lost it when they see you nurturing what they're desperately trying to kill. But your water bill and your thriving garden will prove you right. Let's dive in. Number 1, Purslane. If you've been gardening for more than a season, you've seen this plant. It's that succulent-looking weed with thick, paddle-shaped leaves and reddish stems that sprawls across the ground. Most people hate it because it spreads like crazy and seems impossible to kill. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. Purslane has a massive taproot that can reach down 3 feet or more. But what's really impressive is the horizontal root system. It creates a dense mat that holds soil in place and prevents erosion during heavy rains, which means when drought hits, your topsoil is still there instead of washed away. But the real magic is in those thick leaves. Purslane is what botanists call a CAM plant, which stands for crassulation acid metabolism. Basically, it's evolved to thrive in hot, dry conditions by opening its stomata at night instead of during the day, which means it loses almost no water to evaporation. When you let purslane grow between your vegetable rows or around the base of fruit trees, you're essentially installing a living mulch that requires zero maintenance and actually improves over time. The leaves are so succulent and thick that they shade the soil and create a cool, moist microclimate underneath. I've measured soil temperature differences of up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit between purslane-covered areas and bare soil just 3 feet away. Here's how to manage it strategically. Let it grow in pathways and around the drip line of trees and shrubs. Keep it pulled back about 6 inches from the base of your vegetables to prevent competition for nutrients during the active growing season. And here's a bonus that most people don't know. Purslane is edible and incredibly nutritious. It has more omega-3 fatty acids than any other leafy vegetable, plus vitamin A, vitamin C, and magnesium. When you do pull some to keep it in check, toss it in your salad instead of the compost bin. The flavor is mild and slightly tangy, almost lemony. Your body and your garden both win. The biggest mistake I see gardeners make with purslane is pulling it out early in the season when the soil is still moist and cool. That's exactly when you want it establishing its root system. Wait until it's hot and dry, and you'll see why this plant is called a drought defender. While everything else is wilting, purslane stays plump and green, keeping your soil covered and protected. Number 2, Lambsquarters. This is one of the most underappreciated plants in North American gardens, and I'll admit I spent years pulling it out before I understood what I was destroying. Lambsquarters, also called wild spinach or goosefoot, is that tall plant with silvery green, diamond-shaped leaves that often pops up in recently disturbed soil or along garden edges. The root system on Lambsquarters is absolutely remarkable. It's not just deep, it's multi-directional. The main taproot can penetrate 4 to 6 feet down, but it sends out lateral roots in every direction that mine nutrients from a huge area. When this plant is actively growing, it's pulling up minerals from deep in the subsoil, particularly calcium, phosphorus, and potassium, and concentrating them in its leaves. When you cut it back or it dies naturally, all those nutrients get deposited right on the surface where your shallow-rooted vegetables can access them. But here's the drought protection angle. That deep taproot creates a channel that stays open even after the plant is gone. Rain and irrigation water follow these channels straight down into the subsoil instead of running off or evaporating. I've dug up sections of my garden to examine this, and you can literally see the root channels acting like tiny wells. In heavy clay soils, this is absolutely critical because clay compacts so easily and becomes impermeable during drought. The silvery coating on Lambsquarters leaves is actually tiny white hairs that reflect sunlight and reduce the plant's water loss. When you have a stand of Lambsquarters growing, even if you eventually cut it down, it's providing shade and reducing soil temperature during its growth phase. Research from agricultural studies shows that every degree you can lower soil surface temperature reduces evaporation exponentially. Here's my management strategy for Lambsquarters. In spring, when seedlings appear, I let them grow in clusters at the ends of garden beds and in pathways. I keep them thinned to about 1 plant per square foot so they're not competing too much with each other. Once they reach about 18 inches tall, usually by early summer, I cut them down to about 6 inches above the soil. This serves multiple purposes. First, it gives me a massive amount of green mulch material that's loaded with nutrients. I lay these cuttings right on the soil around my vegetables. Second, cutting stimulates the plant to send out more lateral roots as it regrows, which improves soil structure even more. Third, it keeps the plant from going to seed and becoming too aggressive. And yes, like Purslane, Lambsquarters is also edible. In fact, it's nutritionally superior to spinach in almost every category. The young leaves can be eaten raw, and older leaves are excellent cooked. Native American peoples cultivated this plant deliberately for thousands of years before European crops arrived. We're the weird ones for calling it a weed. One more thing about Lambsquarters. It's a nitrogen accumulator, which means it works with soil bacteria to pull nitrogen from the air and store it in nodules on its roots. When you cut the plant, or it dies back, that nitrogen becomes available to other plants. You're essentially getting free fertilizer that also protects against drought. Show me an expensive garden product that does both. Number 3, dandelion. I know. You're probably thinking, there's no way I'm keeping dandelions in my garden. But hear me out, because the dandelion's reputation as a lawn pest has completely overshadowed its value as a garden protector. The dandelion taproot is legendary. It can extend down 10 feet or more in the right soil conditions, making it one of the deepest-rooted plants you'll find anywhere. But it's not just the depth that matters. As that taproot grows, it literally breaks up hardpan and compacted layers that prevent water infiltration. I've had soil that was so compacted I couldn't push a shovel more than 4 inches deep. After letting dandelions grow there for one season, the soil structure completely transformed. The taproot creates permanent channels that last for years after the plant is gone. Here's what happens in drought conditions. While shallow-rooted plants are struggling because the top 6 inches of soil is bone dry, dandelions are pulling moisture from deep underground and actually releasing some of that moisture into the surrounding soil through their root system. Studies on hydraulic redistribution, which is the fancy term for this process, have shown that deep-rooted plants like dandelions can move water from wet subsoil into drier topsoil layers at night. They're basically running a water delivery service for your vegetables. The leaves of dandelions also serve a protective function. Before they flower, dandelion leaves form dense rosettes that shade the soil surface. After flowering, if you cut them back, they produce a second flush of leaves that continues the soil protection. Those leaves are also high in calcium and other minerals that improve soil structure when they decompose. Now, managing dandelions in a garden requires more finesse than the other plants I've mentioned because they can become aggressive if you let them go to seed. Here's my system. I allow dandelions to grow in specific zones, along the edges of garden beds, in pathways between raised beds, and especially in any area where I'm trying to improve soil structure. I do not let them flower in these areas. As soon as I see a flower bud forming, I cut the entire plant down to ground level. This prevents seed spread while keeping that valuable taproot working in the soil. For areas where I want the deep rooting benefit but don't want to manage flowering, I plant vegetables or flowers right on top of where dandelions grew the previous season. That taproot channel is now a direct water pathway to deep soil moisture. I've planted tomatoes in these spots and watched them thrive through 2-week dry spells without supplemental watering. One technique I love is using dandelions as indicator plants for soil compaction. If dandelions are struggling to grow in an area, or if their taproots are stubby and shallow, that tells me I have serious compaction issues that need addressing. If they're thriving with long taproots, I know my soil structure is good. The edible and medicinal uses of dandelion are well documented, so I won't go deep into that here, but I will say that dandelion root tea made from roots you dig yourself is infinitely better than anything you'll buy at a store. Just make sure you're harvesting from areas that haven't been treated with chemicals. Number 4. Clover. specifically white clover and red clover. Now, some of you might be thinking clover isn't really a weed, and you're right to question that. In fact, up until the 1950s, clover was actually included in quality lawn seed mixes. Chemical companies convinced us it was a weed so they could sell us herbicides. But in garden contexts, most people still treat it as something to eliminate, and that's a huge mistake. Clover is a legume, which means it has a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that fix atmospheric nitrogen and store it in nodules on the plant's roots. Every square foot of healthy clover can add up to 5 pounds of nitrogen to your soil per year. That's like getting free fertilizer that also happens to protect against drought. The nitrogen doesn't just help the clover, it becomes available to every plant growing nearby. But the drought protection aspect is equally impressive. Clover forms a dense, low-growing mat that completely covers the soil surface. This living mulch reduces evaporation by up to 60% compared to bare soil. The coverage is so complete that it also prevents weed seeds from germinating, which means fewer plants competing for moisture. The root system, while not as deep as Dandelion or Lambsquarters, is incredibly dense and fibrous. These roots hold soil particles together, preventing erosion and improving soil structure. They also create thousands of tiny channels that allow water to infiltrate instead of running off. White clover stays lower to the ground, typically only 3 to 6 inches tall, which makes it perfect for planting between vegetable rows or around the base of fruit trees and shrubs. Red clover grows taller, up to 2 feet, and has a more robust root system, making it better for areas you want to rehabilitate or for use as a chop-and-drop mulch source. Here's how I use clover strategically in my garden. In pathways between raised beds, I maintain permanent white clover. It handles foot traffic reasonably well, stays green during drought when grass would turn brown, and requires zero mowing if you keep it dense. Around fruit trees and perennial beds, I broadcast clover seed and let it establish as a living mulch. The nitrogen it provides benefits the trees, and the soil coverage keeps moisture in. In annual vegetable beds, I plant clover in paths between rows and cut it back if it starts to encroach on my vegetables. One technique that works brilliantly is using clover as a cover crop in beds that are resting between plantings. Instead of leaving soil bare for even a few weeks, sow clover thickly. It germinates in just a few days and quickly covers the ground. When you're ready to plant, you can cut it down and use it as mulch or work it lightly into the surface. All that nitrogen and organic matter feeds your next crop. The flowers on clover are also valuable. They attract pollinators like crazy, including native bees that are often more effective pollinators than honeybees for certain crops. More pollinators means better yields on everything from tomatoes to squash. During drought, when many flowering plants struggle, clover keeps blooming, providing critical food sources for beneficial insects. Number 5. Amaranth. Specifically, the wild species like Palmer amaranth and redroot pigweed. Now, I need to be upfront about something. In agricultural settings, particularly in industrial monoculture farms, Palmer amaranth has developed herbicide resistance and become a serious problem. But in a diverse garden setting, managed properly, pigweed species are phenomenal drought protectors and soil builders. Amaranth has one of the most efficient water use systems of any plant. It's what's called a C4 plant, which means it has a special photosynthetic pathway that allows it to produce more biomass with less water than most vegetables. During drought conditions, when your tomatoes and peppers are struggling, amaranth just keeps growing. That vigorous growth is creating shade and protecting soil moisture for the plants around it. The root system on amaranth is incredibly aggressive. The taproot can reach 6 to 8 feet deep in a single growing season, and it sends out lateral roots that mine nutrients from a wide area. Like Lambsquarters, amaranth is a nutrient accumulator, pulling up minerals from deep soil layers and concentrating them in its leaves. When you cut it down, those nutrients become available at the surface. Here's the key to managing amaranth successfully. Never let it go to seed. A single amaranth plant can produce up to 1 million seeds, and those seeds can remain viable in the soil for decades. This is non-negotiable. You must cut it before flowering. In practice, What I do is allow Amaranth seedlings to emerge in early summer in areas where I want the soil building and moisture protection benefits. I let them grow to about 2 to 3 feet tall, then cut them down completely. The plant will try to re-sprout, which is fine because that means more root growth and soil improvement. I cut it again when it reaches about 18 inches. By late summer, I pull the root completely if I'm going to plant in that area. Or I cut it a final time and let it decompose in place. The biomass production from Amaranth is absolutely staggering. A single plant can produce 10 to 15 pounds of leafy material in 8 to 10 weeks. When you cut this down and lay it on the soil surface, you're creating a thick mulch layer that protects moisture and feeds soil organisms. This material is high in nitrogen, so it breaks down relatively quickly, which means nutrients become available to other plants within a few weeks. During extreme drought, I've observed that areas where Amaranth grew the previous season or earlier the same season retain moisture far longer than adjacent areas. The explanation seems to be twofold. The deep root channels allow water to penetrate quickly into subsoil where it's protected from evaporation, and the decomposing root mass acts as a sponge that holds moisture in the root zone. One more benefit worth mentioning: the leaves of Amaranth are edible and highly nutritious. In many parts of the world, Amaranth leaves are cultivated as a vegetable crop. The young leaves can be eaten raw in salads, and older leaves are excellent cooked like spinach. The seeds, if you were to let the plant mature fully, are also edible and were a staple grain crop in pre-Columbian Americas. I'm not suggesting you grow it for seed in your garden because of the management challenges, but knowing that the plant has food value adds another dimension to its usefulness. Your garden is a living system, not a factory floor. These 5 weeds are part of that system, and when you work with them instead of against them, everybody wins. Especially your plants, your soil, and your water bill during the next drought. If this video changed how you think about weeds, hit that like button and subscribe to Garden Crumbs for more practical, science-based gardening content that actually works in real-world conditions. Drop a comment below and let me know which of these 5 weeds you're going to start managing differently, and if you've already been doing this, share your experience. I love hearing from gardeners who are thinking beyond conventional approaches. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.